this is great. This is actually a very smart heater. It's not just kind of turning on and off remotely, but it makes you money.
So when you're building a product like HeatBit, I mean, you're solving a lot of problems and making something that people think of as pretty mundane, just part of everyday life.
To be honest, I think right now the impact is relatively small. The machines are becoming available, and I think as the industry grows, we're going to compete. We're going to come up with better devices, better form factors, cheaper prices, etc.
Welcome back to Hosting Bitcoin, the show where we explore the builders, the breakthroughs, and bold ideas shaping the future of sovereignty, energy, and decentralized infrastructure. Today's guest is a pioneer at the intersection of heat and hash rate. He's a founder who's taking mining out of the warehouse and into your living room. Alex Busarov is the creator of HeatBit, which is the world's first space heater that mines Bitcoin. And it's not just a clever product, it's really a signal of a much bigger shift. One where ordinary people can turn their homes into sovereign, value-generating spaces. One where wasted energy becomes wealth, and where decentralization isn't just a theory that we talk about, it's something that you plug in, power on in your living room, and benefit from every day. With a background in engineering, energy, and entrepreneurship, Alex saw an opportunity to create something that not only heats homes, it also earns money and helps people learn about the Bitcoin network while being a part of securing it. And today we're diving into the origin of HeatBit, the future of home mining, the role of energy reuse in Bitcoin's next chapter, and what it means to build tools that people actually use in emerging industries. Alex, thank you for joining me on Hosting Bitcoin today.
Thanks for the invitation.
So before we talk about what I'm sure we're going to talk about this probably entire time, heating and hash rate, I would love to know, what was your personal journey into Bitcoin? What's your background? How did you get into this wild world of Bitcoin mining and hash rate heating?
Thank you. My personal journey with Bitcoin, I actually learned about Bitcoin very early on. I remember hearing it in all sorts of websites and news back in 2009. I just started my professional career at the time. Like my first month I was working at a company was October 2008. Incidentally. So as the financial crisis was just starting, and that's how I think there was some publications that came out about, there's this new thing, idea, Bitcoin, at the time. And so I kind of heard about this, but I didn't dig in yet. I started to dig in much more and learn about this in around 2017. But where I really started to become a Bitcoiner was when I started HeatBit. That was 2020. And for me, to be honest, it didn't start with, more with the HeatBit. It didn't start with the idea of support of decentralized money. The first idea for me was around the use of energy. You use energy for two things at the same time. It seems like a smart thing to do. It's a valuable resource. So, through that and kind of thinking more about what we're actually building, I started to become more and more of a Bitcoiner, and the things around support of the decentralized money, the security, bringing security to the network, and I think much better way of orange peeling people through mining as well, started to play a much bigger role for me personally. That was the journey with the Bitcoin, and kind of how it ended up with HeatBit. My personal background, I'm a bachelor of science and philosophy. Actually, mostly the philosophy of science. So people often think it's more like, who said what, and philosophers just talk about stuff. It was a little different. So I went to LSE, London School of Economics. The philosophy department there is much more about, it's much more technical. So we had lectures where Our professor would come in, just say the only one word, hello, and then he would just start writing formulas on the whiteboard. I guess this is set theory lectures. Like they didn't talk much, and so it's on one hand it's philosophy, on the other hand it was very very technical. And then my first job, it was in consulting, and a lot of the work in consulting I did on energy. So I did things like a national green and nuclear energy strategy for a country. And I didn't do the whole strategy. I was an analyst on the team, who did the numbers essentially. Because it was first job. I was very very junior. Or things like the work around the power distribution networks. What do you do with all those lines? Or more operational work with the power stations. And so energy was something I understood fairly well. And when in 2020, when I was living in Shanghai, and we were one of the first to be hit with the lockdowns with
Mm.
COVID. I was getting a little bored. I bought myself, and I never did mining before that. I bought myself a miner. It was S9K, I believe. I turned it on in my bedroom. It was a toy. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna buy this mine and get rich. No, it was like, let's just play with it. It's fun. It was more like a toy for an adult. Yeah, you turn it on and it kind of gets loud, and it gets hot, and it's like, oh, if it weren't that loud, it would be great heat. Uh, that was the yeah, that's the background and a bit of a personal story of how it all started.
So, for those who aren't familiar with it, HeatBit is essentially a Bitcoin mining space heater. How was it just completely out of that personal experience that you thought, oh, this could be like a product? Or what went into you actually turning what we all know as the trusty S9, one of the most resilient miners we've ever seen in the world? How did that turn into essentially the Apple product of home heating that you've popularized now?
Well, it's not a short journey. People don't call it hardware for nothing. It's sweat, blood, and tears. I tell you. As an idea, it literally was this. I think maybe the background and energy, understanding that all things about the loads, how it could kind of help to reduce the load when it's needed, or you often need more heat at night because it's colder and the power prices often lower at night, like stuff like that. And it kind of clicked, was like, well, but this is great. This is actually a very smart heater. Like this, as smart as it gets, right? It's not just kind of turning on and off remotely, and it's not just connected to Wi-Fi, but it makes you money. So that was this idea that clicked. It was back in like February, March 2020. And then I thought, well, but this seems so obvious. Like people must have done it. I just don't know. But how with a lot of ideas, that's the case.
Yeah.
So I went online. I started searching for the mining heaters, and it turned out that people do it. There's been plenty of talk. People would use those miners for heating, but there was more DIY, right? And it's great. Like people, the idea was there. People wanted to do it. At the same time, it didn't seem like companies cared to make an actual product, because for consumer grade product, it takes a little more than changing the body. So I thought, well, looks like people do it already. It's just wasn't professionalized yet, so it's gonna come at some point anyway. Yeah, and then you start. You have different concepts. Some things work, some things don't work. There's a lot of work with your hands, with the tools, figuring out what do you do with the noise. What it shouldn't break, it shouldn't fall, it should be safe, like all these things. A lot of concepts fail, but then at some point something starts working.
What do people not appreciate about what goes into a product like this? You mentioned a little bit. It's not just an S9 with a case on it. I mean, there's a lot on the back end of creating a consumer product.
Yes. I think what do people not appreciate? Well, there's different approaches to making these products. For now, one is you can take an existing miner and you can repackage it.
Hmm.
And this was one of our first steps. We've actually taken the S9 and built around it. So the first HeatBit that we launched really long time ago by now, there was an actual S9 at the core. But then there were all the features to make it quiet and safety features to make it safer to use at home. These features often underappreciated. So there's the safety switches that you need, the special types of plastics that don't burn, the certifications that you need to go through. People often don't know about these details, so they kind of don't appreciate it enough. But then we took a further step. And I think anyone who's moving along this journey will take this step as well when you start building your own miners. Right? So you don't build around the miner to make a heater, but you start actually building the miner so it is from the start part of a heater.
Hmm.
So it's a different form factor. It's completely different approach to electronics. Like I'll give you an example. Right now for the HeatBit Maxi, we use S19J Pro chips. We don't use S19J Pro. We take out those chips. We get them off the market. But then it lays over the PCBs that the circuit boards that we designed. And there's a big difference in design that we made in the sense of how those chips operate. For the S19J Pro, they organized on a line, so it's like a serial connection.
Hmm.
And what that means, if one of the chips fail, most likely the whole line will fail. So you have three hash boards. You do mining, right? I'm sure you know all this
Oh
well,
yeah,
right?
it's very frustrating. One piece out of 100 fails, and the whole thing is down.
And the whole not the whole miner is down, but the one hash board is down,
Right.
right? Because it's separated into three hash boards. So and for an industrial setting, it's kind of okay. It is frustrating, but the idea is that, well, if it's an industrial setting, you have some monitoring system, you see that this one is down, you stop that miner, you take out that hash board, you replace that chip, you put it back. Now, this scenario doesn't really work for home applications because not everyone is a technician who can get it done. And frankly, we shouldn't expect our users to be able to do it themselves, right? So the way that we organized it, it's not three hash boards, it's 12 hash boards,
Hmm.
and each one has 12 chips. So it's kind of this kind of size small hash board, HeatBit hash board, maxi. And so if one of the chip goes down, that hash board can be turned off separately. So that means you don't lose like half of the miner, you don't lose third of the miner, you lose maybe 8%. And sometimes part of that hash board keeps working. So maybe you lose like 4% with a faulty chip. So like these kind of design changes that you need to start making because it's a consumer product and not an industrial product. And I know maybe I'm getting a little too deep into this, but this is exactly the kind of thing that people often don't know about, and thus they don't appreciate it enough.
No, it's perfect because
And the other, yeah,
there's so much that goes into these, and I'm just thinking from the mindset of someone who's like, well, let me just go get a S9 for free and plug it in my house and basically have the same thing. They don't appreciate what all goes into something like this to make it consumer ready.
Another thing would be things around the safety. So an S9, S19, they are built as industrial devices, and that is a certain safety standard. But once you make it a consumer product, there's a lot more that you need to do, right? You need to make sure. So there's something called certification. There's UL certification, CSA for Canada, UL for US. And they have a lot of pretty smart things there to pass those tests. They first actually charge you quite a bit of money, but once you realize what they actually do, it makes sense. They do things like, obviously, kind of they drop it and see kind of, does it become a hazard. Then you know how in every heater they say don't cover it with a blanket, because it could be unsafe. So what they do, they actually cover it with a blanket, because, like, someone is going to be, that one consumer who will cover it with a blanket. So they actually do it, and the device should basically not cause fire. There are more specific rules around this, but basically it shouldn't cause fire. Or they take like a tube. I don't remember the exact length. I think it's like 1.5 meters long or around that. And then they have this metal ball, similar to you remember when Elon Musk would throw the balls at the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like that kind of a ball, and then so they put that tube on top of your device, and then they drop the ball onto it. So that's the test that, if something hits your device, the device should not break down, and again, shouldn't cause fire, shouldn't become an electric hazard. We even had like a bit of a marketing stunt with, like, the actual video from the testing lab, and our device survived on one side, and then Elon Musk throwing his, like, oops, on the other. It was kind of fun. So this kind of safety things, I think people often underappreciate. Oh, frankly, like, if something is built for the consumer grade, the kids should be able to run around, and, like, if they touch it, if they knock it over, it shouldn't become a problem, right? Whereas if it's an industrial device, there's a miner, there's it used to be that the S19s that I've seen, not all of them have this cover for the power connection at the top. I don't know, maybe we've just seen a lot of old miners, and there's a lot of amps that go through those connections. So you don't want kids running around those. I think that's the kind of stuff that are underappreciated. Plus, maybe that's getting a little too deep, but I don't know how the insurance companies look at using industrial devices as heaters at home. So if, God forbid, anything happens, I'm not sure they'd be happy.
You definitely want to be covered if something is going to happen. Um, have you found that there's an educational gap? Like when we're talking to people about hosted mining, for example, there's a lot of teaching to do usually of how it works, what it is, why people do it. Have you had similar troubles getting people to understand why they should mine Bitcoin through their heater?
I think, yeah, and there's different, different people know different things, so there's kind of different steps that some people don't know what Bitcoin is, what Bitcoin mining is. So that's one kind of education that you need to do. And by the way, like I mentioned, the home heating mining could be one of the best ways to orange pill people, because it's always net positive then. Like, you're not spending anything extra, right? Most people kind of put some money into Bitcoin. It goes up, they're happy. It goes down, they hate Bitcoin. Whereas if you start with hashrate heating, you're like, well, there's this thing that covers part of my bill. Always net positive. Like, it just can cover more, cover less because of the price fluctuations, but it's always net positive. That's when I realized, I'm like, well, there's another benefit. And then the other common misconception that for people who kind of already know something about Bitcoin or mining, they often don't know physics well enough, and they think, oh, but if I use this thing that mines and heats, it's going to use more energy for the mining, so it's going to be unprofitable. That's complete misunderstanding of the physics of energy. There's kind of certain energy that goes in as electricity and comes out as heat. Whether you use chips, whether you use heating coil, like anything you use, it's just going to be the same amount of energy. I don't know if any people with engineering background watch this video. They might say, "Oh, but no, some things will come out as vibration, some things will come out as light, etc." That is true. But one, it's actually or radiation, and this very small amount of that energy, and two, it ends up being heat anyway. Even vibration, when it comes out, it hits the wall, it hits your wall. that's that's it. So and you need to educate people on this. I think this is the biggest misconception. People think, oh, it's going to use more energy. No, it doesn't. And that's the beautiful thing about this. Then sometimes it's about the numbers. People think, oh, but I think a lot of people take what we do as with the mining mindset. If you have S19J Pro chips inside, so you have the efficiency of like 33 joules per terahash. They think, oh, but if I use this, it's unprofitable for me to run. Well, if you think of it as a miner, then don't buy a heater. Go get a miner and use it in a mining setting. In industrial setup, and probably with cheaper electricity rate. But then, if you want to, from what I understand, you can't really do mining at home and be profitable, because the retail power tariffs are a lot higher than industrial power tariffs. And then in this setting, you're kind of competing with the industrial power tariff. It's impossible to be profitable unless you're kind of stealing electricity one way or another. But if you don't think of it as a miner, you think of it as a heater, which means you don't use it in summer, for example, right? But you only use it when you actually need heat, then it's always net positive, because you would have used that electricity anyway. Your bill is not going to change. You're just going to get sats on top of what you do.
This is, I think, the most common misunderstanding around hash rate heating is just like you said, and you said it beautifully, but I just want to repeat it because you're not doing anything additional with the energy is probably the most core part of this. There's no additional energy that's really lost in any meaningful way to the hashing process. You're truly just choosing to run energy through a chip rather than a resistive coil or some other heating element, but getting essentially exactly the same efficiency, except one version you're computing toward the network and actually getting rewards for it. Your heater's paying you. And the other, you're just exhausting heat as entropy and nothing is happening in the meantime. And when
Exactly.
people think about it in the ROI sense, like, duh. I mean, you're already spending the energy for the heat, especially if you live in a cold climate. I mean, you're likely heating your home, your building, your office all throughout the season and spending hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of dollars a month on making sure those spaces are livable. And all you're doing is offsetting that with a byproduct. And it's the best byproduct in the world.
Yeah. Or you run it as a solar miner, and that's a completely different ballgame.
Can you tell who's doing that versus who's using a heat bit to mine to a pool? Or do you have any
Uh,
sense of who chooses to do what?
it's people who know about solar mining, and want to do solar mine. That's people who do it. There's people who use the devices for solar mining. I think most people who run bit access, I would guess most of them solar mine. I actually don't know the stats. For HeatBit, we have a big share of our users who solar mine as well. So the way that we set it up was like, okay, let's make it plug and play. That means that initially it's already pointed to Apple, and we use Luxor right now. But then, well, some people want to point it somewhere else. Some people want to solar mine. So it's just open for them to switch to whichever way they want to use the heater. And yeah, I think it's a personal choice. Some people prefer to get a little bit extra to cover part of the power bill, or sometimes it's not that little. I've seen faces of our users. I remember I was having lunch with a friend of mine, who he lives in Miami, but his HeatBit, it was somewhere more northern than that. With his brother, I think, or I forgot, was someone of his friend, someone in his family, I think. But he had the app, and he was like, "Oh, Alex, yeah, I haven't opened my app for a long time because it was used during the winter, but I was here in Miami. I didn't, I don't really need a heater." And then he opens up the app. I was like, "What? $200?" you know? Like what? He didn't, because it accumulates. Like it's like you think, oh, it's little bit by little bit, yes, but over time, because it doesn't ask you to actively do anything about it. It's like any other heater. You turn it on and just heats, and then it becomes hot outside. You turn it off, but then you look at the balance. It's quite a bit. We have users who made thousands of dollars, especially those who started early on when the price of Bitcoin was lower. They were earning relatively more in sats, and then when the price of Bitcoin went up, we have users who earn like $3,000-4,000 on their heaters. So yeah, I said like bit by bit, but it's not that little bit by bit. Or coming back to the solar mining, yeah, some people prefer to just get this. I think you can call it a perpetual lottery ticket, right? It's actually pretty good odds compared to a normal lottery, but it's also perpetual. You just keep playing that game, and on average, every 10 minutes, someone wins that game. Most of the time, right now, that would be some mining machine and like one of those big mining sweatshops, probably owned by a big mining facility. But sometimes it's going to be the solar miners, and sometimes you win the block, get more than 3 Bitcoin. It's quite a bit of money. I don't know. Maybe save it. Maybe get your Lambo. It's up to you.
I can't imagine that anybody would tell you just because they don't want to blow up their privacy. But has anybody told you that they've won a solo block with one of your heat bits?
Not yet. No one told us yet. But let's see. The devices from last year run at 10 terahashes, and it's already kind of certain amount of hash rate. We have them in the thousands, but I think we introduced a solar pool not that long ago.
What's interesting about the network for people that don't know is you can actually tell, and I don't know exactly how this happens, but you can tell pretty reliably what kind of machine actually wins a block based on some sort of signature. So I imagine it would be possible to say, oh, that was a heat bit that actually won the block, even if nobody tells you.
I think it tends to come from the stats of the pool, and the pool can see the hash rate. It's not a machine signature, because the machine just does the calculations, right?
Right.
Even the stuff that goes into the block, it's not decided by the miner; it's decided by the node. So, in terms of signature, kind of what's written into the block, it's not the machine. The node could write in anything they want within a certain limit. But they normally look at the hash rate. So, and then, you can infer, it's like, oh, maybe it's this or maybe it's that.
Have you ever felt like you've done everything right, built the business, made smart investments, and yet there's still one piece missing? If you're someone who believes in Bitcoin but hasn't yet explored mining, let me introduce you to something that most people never even realize exists, and that is fully managed Bitcoin mining with Abundant Mines. We help high net worth individuals like you own industrial grade mining infrastructure without ever touching the machines. It's hands free, professionally hosted, and designed to generate passive income by turning electricity into Bitcoin every single day. It's tax advantaged, it's asset backed, and for many of our clients, it's become one of the smartest moves that they've ever made in their investing career. So if you're ready to take the next step into real Bitcoin ownership, not just holding, but producing it at a discount, visit abundantminds.com. That's abundantminds.com and see why this strategy is changing the game for serious investors. So when you're building a product like HeatBit, I mean, you're solving a lot of problems and making something that people think of as pretty mundane, just part of everyday life, a chance to one, learn about Bitcoin, which is awesome. I love orange pilling people in a way that they were never expecting and with a resource that they already needed. Uh, but hash rate heating in general, I think, is a very important movement. I mean, the whole heat punk movement is this very interesting group of people that are really doing something very interesting. I'm curious what you think of as the mission behind popularizing HeatBit and how you see hash rate heating's impact on energy systems, on the network, just the whole space in general.
So we're big friends. Like I know Tyler from
Mhm.
with from for quite a long time by now. We met at Denver at BitDevs. Forgot which year it was, but it was before the manifesto, before like he started all this. Like we've known each other for quite some time. It's a really cool guy. Um, and yeah, we're friends. We kind of exchange ideas sometimes, and it's people building together in a way, right? We exchange our ideas. He often have great ideas, and people in community have a lot of great ideas. So it's this, I think, positive energy that flows around between different community members. In terms of the popularizing hash rate heating and where it's going to go, I think, to be honest, I think right now the impact is relatively small.
Mhm.
You could look at the amount of terahashes, or peta, zettahashes, terahashes that come from hash rate heating. For now, it's still relatively small relative to the rest of the Bitcoin network. Most of the Bitcoin right now is still mined in big warehouses full of mining machines. At the same time, I think it will change. And it would start changing even earlier, but there were no machines available, right? The manufacturers of the machines that would focus on the industrial segment because that's where the big orders came from, and they were happy with it. And at the same time, miners could still make money with those machines. So it was kind of the situation was balanced that way. Then machines started to come out with DIY people. They were the first ones to start heating with hash rate. Then we came in and started making this professional devices. Then more companies are coming in. Like every few months, I learn about there's this new company that does it this way or that way. So the machines are becoming available, and I think as the industry grows, we're gonna compete. We're gonna come up with better devices, better form factors, cheaper prices, etc. So that's what we're going to do from our side, but there's going to be something from the side of Bitcoin that's just going to push the standard industrial mining into that direction. And that's like once every 4 years there's this huge push. It was like, no, you're going to get a lot more efficient. So the halving, right? Every 4 years there's the halving. And I remember speaking to a senior executive from one of the biggest public mining companies in late April 2024, late April last year, just after the halving. Like he was like, I was like, hey, how you guys doing? He's like, well, Alex, of course we know that the halving is coming in, but one thing is to expect it, and another thing is to see how your revenues are halved. Your cost base stays the same. Your revenues are basically halved. No, maybe the difficulty goes down a little bit, but it tends not to, right? And then the 2024 howling was okay. Let's see what's going to happen in 2028, and let's see what's going to happen in 2032, because it's a game of the halvings go against the efficiency gains of the chips, right? So you had certain processes, so certain the fabrication process for the chips that kept improving the energy efficiency of the chips. So last year, some of the best miners would be at what, like 15 to 20 joules per terahash. Now we see miners that are coming out with just under 10 joules per terahash. So there are still efficiency gains that companies as Bitmain, MicroBT, Auradine, etc., are able to to make these efficiency gains. But at some point, those efficiency gains will plateau as well. At some point, it becomes impossible to make it more efficient on the chip level, because for now they've just been putting more and more transistors onto the chip, and that was possible because the fabrication process would use the parts that would be smaller and smaller. You know how you went from I think the first ASIC was 60 nanometer process. I may be completely wrong about this. I think it
I think it
was
was a couple hundred. I think
couple
it was a
hundred
couple hundred
processors.
nanometers. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was very
Now,
large.
now it's going down to like three. And when it's at three, and Bitmain, I think the latest ones are three blocks producing, from what I know, at three. This is already top notch. It doesn't go further than this. This is when they compete for the fab time with companies like Apple, right? So that's already pretty big limitation, right? You need to be that big, and you already compete for the latest fab process. But 1 nanometer, you can already. It's small. People don't realize how small it is. You can think of it in terms of number of atoms, right? It's few tens of atoms of hydrogen, I believe. Like it's very small. So maybe we can still go down to 2 nanometers. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we could go down to one, but it physically becomes impossible to go lower than that at some point, unless we completely change the computing paradigm. Unless we go from like electrical transistors to light or some biological calculations or whatnot, right? Like completely different paradigm, and that's nowhere near yet. So coming back to the mining efficiency, some point is going to plateau, and it's like, okay, so we can't get any more efficient chips. Whatever we do is just impossible. So you're gonna have to think, okay, how do we become more efficient on the energy side? And reusing the heat is the most obvious one, because you look at the P&L of a mining company, 80% of the cost is going to be energy,
Hmm.
electricity, and well, why not just reduce that down to zero? Maybe you need to pay a little more on the cost of hardware, because either you have high requirements, like consumer products would have high requirements, so they're more expensive, and also maybe you don't use them 99% of the time, so utilization rate goes down, which for Bitcoin increases your cost of hardware. But again, coming back to P&L of a mining company, if 80% is energy, 15% is machines, and 5% is salary of the CEO, this the that 15% grows, let's say doubles, becomes like 30. It's still a lot less than the cost of energy, right? Because the hardware, it tends to get cheaper. Like think of the CPUs, the RAM, like think of the PCs that we had in the 90s, right? Things got a lot cheaper and a lot better. That's what happens with hardware. There's clear progress. Whereas on the energy side, yeah, they use so much energy right now. So halving will basically push into that direction. It's like Bitcoin just pushes it in that way. It's not only the hash rate heating; it's going to be the load balancing. You can do other things, and I think there's different niches and segments that mining will go into, and it's just natural. It's just will have to go that way.
Yeah. There'll be so many different strategies for how to evolve with the changing network. I love hash rate heating so much, specifically because it's so aligned with consumer behavior. It naturally decentralizes the network, so people who otherwise would not go over the barrier of activation to work toward decentralizing the network naturally just are, because they're solving their own problem. You don't have to convince them to do what's right for the network. They're just naturally engaging in that behavior. And then you're putting resources to use, which I know Tyler has a stat around this, which I think is half of all of our energy needs are for heat. And about 25% of those needs are comfort heat, which is exactly what you're producing. So a quarter of all of the energy in the world, in a sense, we're wasting by not using hash rate heating in many of these applications. And I'm such a sucker for efficiency and making the most of what
Same.
you've got in front of you. And so it's such a beautiful solution. You know, people will laugh at us for saying Bitcoin fixes this when we talk about anything under the sun, but Bitcoin really fixes this. It's pretty unbelievable.
True, true. I think with those numbers, I think it's important though to go a little deeper. It's absolutely true. There's this huge heat demand and comfort heat, energy demand for that, but a lot of that energy comes from other sources that could not be used for compute. Right? Most of the heating doesn't come from electric heat. Most of the heating comes from, depending on the areas, gas or district heat. But even if you just take the electric heat, residential electric heating demand is about 600 terawatt hours every year. The whole of Bitcoin mining network uses about 150 terawatt hours. Maybe 200, there's different estimates, but a lot less. And it's just residential, just electric space heating.
Wow. How much of the comfort heating market do you think could be taken by hash rate heating?
It will take a bit of time because it takes time to develop the hardware. But I think it can be. My gut feel would be around 70-80%, because over time what happens, so right now the natural blockers would be the hardware and the cost of hardware, right?
Hmm.
It just takes, for us, for anyone else doing the same similar things, it just takes time to deliver the devices. And you start with something relatively expensive, and then you can make things that are cheaper and cheaper. Like your volumes grow, your expertise grows, so you are able to make cheaper devices. On the energy side, it makes complete sense, right? It's always a net winner to mine with an electric heater than to not mine with an electric heater on the energy side.
Mhm.
Now, where the barrier for that would be that the cost of a heating coil is always going to be lower than the cost of something that can mine Bitcoin for the same amount of power, because that would be the PCBs, the chips. You need some capacitors. You need the more electrical connection. You need the power supply unit, right? It's just more, and that's going to be the barrier. And the way that that barrier operates, whether it becomes, it's something stops you from heating and mining or not, is actually determined by the your utilization rate of that device. So if you live in an area where you use a heater maybe 10% of the year, you're more likely to just keep using the regular heating coil, just because the cost of it is going to be lower. Whereas if you live in an area where you use your heater 30-40% of the time, you at some point you're going to start mining Bitcoin. Maybe this year, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, who knows? But you'll start doing it because it just makes economic sense. Maybe you will start doing it without realizing it. That's also possible, right? Because
Hmm. What do you mean by that?
as devices evolve, the business models will evolve as well. And right now, people who do hash rate heating, they know about Bitcoin, they know about mining most of the time, or at least they've been educated. But another barrier could be, the people's education. People don't necessarily like to learn. I think most people don't. So for them, there's good companies are going to start offering things like, hey, you get this heater, and we just cover part of your bill, and it starts mining for the company, and maybe the mining companies will start doing that, because otherwise, start going out of business. So it will mine for the company, but then the company will give some benefit back to the user, or maybe it will just subsidize the device itself, and then the user doesn't really get anything apart from a subsidized device. That's also possible. But I think it will go very very far with these.
So do you feel like, I mean, when we're telling the OpEx story, the running cost, the offset of what you're already paying for, it's a really obvious move for somebody to get a hash rate heater. But you feel like the biggest barrier to this being adopted far and wide and very quickly is just the difference in upfront cost. Is that the biggest obstacle to people really getting on board with this in a
I
large
think
way?
so far it's been it's been the availability of the devices, right? There's not that many of them that's been available so far, but I think there's going to be more and more. And over time, it's the capex is going to be it's the only natural difference that will have to stay. Like heating coil will always be cheaper, so that's the only barrier that will just stay, and that will impact the overall adoption long term.
What are you currently working on in the context of HeatBit or even outside that you feel is going to be the most important over the next couple of years, or what kind of changes are you looking to make in it?
A few things we different form factors and making cheaper devices. Right, people use heat in different ways, and they need heat in different ways. So you need to fulfill those needs and making them cheaper. Right now, we focused on the more premium segment because it was a little easier for us, right? Basically, as you develop and as you learn, if you make a mistake and something ends up costing much more, if it's already a mass market cheap device, you are out of the market. You just can't sell it. Whereas if it's premium, it it cuts into your margin. Any mistakes that you make, but you can still sustain it, and that's why we're like, okay, let's just stay in the premium segment because we need time to learn. And now we're gonna start making more of mass market devices where it's simpler inside, still heats, still hashes, but made much simpler inside, which enables us to offer them at much lower prices. I think that's going to be an important few steps that we're going to be taking.
Is there any restriction to where people can get these? You mentioned UL, ETL, and then the Canadian
Uh,
regulations around safety, but are these available worldwide?
we right now we sell in North America predominantly, and the certification is done for North America. We're going to add the European certifications a little later. Selling it worldwide, this is where it can be a little tricky because if you just sell electronics, you don't necessarily need the certifications for every country.
Mhm.
If it's a space heater is normally a high power consumer device, which you know is going to be safe. And every country would have their own certification requirements. So UL and CSA would be for the US and Canada. Europe would have its own unified rules, but then many other countries, like you want to sell to Japan, you want to sell to Argentina, it's a different certification that you need to pass. And
Mm.
most likely you're going to pass it, but you just need to go through the process. So we're kind of slowly adding the countries, I would say.
I could see Europe being a fantastic market, especially with the high price of energy. Any offset is super helpful.
And energy doesn't get cheaper. It's just not, if energy starts getting cheaper, there's probably something wrong with the economy. But it tends to not get cheaper. So yeah, it just makes a natural sense.
What do you want to see happen over the next couple years or even over the next decade in terms of how people participate in the network if they're adopting hash rate heating? What are you pushing for the next few years?
Mm, I think just spreading it more, and what I want to see happening is when people stop being so excited, it's like, oh, the non-industrial miners caught a block. Like, wow. Like right now, it's an event. Every time it's like, oh, the solar miner caught a block, but there's a block every 10 minutes. Okay, and it's exciting, but the fact that people are so excited about this just indicates to me that it tells me that it's still relatively small. Like the hash rate that's done with solar mining, with home heating, is still very, very small compared to the big industrial mining. And I just want that share to actually start becoming meaningful,
Hmm.
because it can and it will move that way. It's just a question of speed.
For people who are listening, they might be just getting into the space, just getting into Bitcoin, looking for ways to work and get more involved in the space. What kind of advice do you have for people who are trying to be more involved in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and navigating the business landscape in this?
Well, it's winter, so if you need a heater, get a heater that mines Bitcoin. I think that's an obvious one, especially coming from me, right? Um, uh, and I think, well, learn, read more about this, and don't focus on the price too much. I think once you stop focusing on the price and realize it's like, well, it's the counterbalance to printing of the money, and money printing just cannot stop. Um, and frankly, it doesn't even depend on the political setup, right? In the if the government is elected, they need to keep their people happy, so they print the money. It's like a short-term, easy kind of solution, right? And then let the next cycle of the government deal with the problems. And so you print more money, but that's the elected government. If you look at the, let's say, medieval history with the kings, they were not elected, but they would still print money, right? There's so many cases. Well, there used to be a gold coin, like golden franc, let's say, but now it's still a golden franc, but it's only half of the weight.
Hmm.
Or there's been cases when it's like, okay, so we have this currency in the country, and then so we introduced the silver coins as well. So we have the same currency, and then some of them are gold and some of them are silver. And I'm gonna collect taxes only in golden coins, though. Uh, but when I pay the government expenses, I'm gonna use silver. Stuff like that would be happening. There's so many cases in history. It's just this money printing just doesn't stop. Like they can't help themselves. Like, oh, but I need to go. I need to go on a crusade. I need money. Let's just half the size of the coin. Um, so that just keeps happening, and Bitcoin acts as a counterbalance, but it's a long term thing, right? There's going to be ups and downs every week, every month, and once you stop caring about that, life gets better. I think that's another important part.
Totally agree with you. The more disconnected you can be from day-to-day price movements and focus on long-term fundamentals, educating yourself, building a better understanding of the world, that returns so much more than anything that you see on a price chart.
Hmm? Yeah.
Well, Alex, you have any final thoughts you want to share with the audience? And also, if someone was curious listening to this, said, I need to get a hash rate heater, where can they find one? Where can they get a HeatBit? And where can people keep up with you and what you're working on?
So our website heatbit.com. Come have a look. There's a few premium devices right now there, Trio and the Maxi. We're gonna have slightly more economical devices coming out fairly soon. So if what you see is not for you just yet, make sure to subscribe to our email list. We don't spam people with all sorts of weird stuff. Like I hate to sign up to stuff, because then every little event they have is like, oh, we got a dog. I'm like, I don't care about your dog. Just tell me about your products. Um, we don't do that. We actually send useful stuff. So yeah, do sign up if like this kind of stuff is of interest to you. And for what we there's Twitter, HeatBit Twitter, my personal Twitter. That's we share more of the stuff that's upcoming, kind of below stories from like behind the scenes of manufacturing and the design, the labs. Yeah, easy. It's easy to find us. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Thank you for building something that helps people. I really appreciate it when someone builds something that helps people who otherwise might not have anything to do with Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining, gives them exposure to it, gives them a way in, gives them something that's sitting right there in their house that has to make them curious because it is earning them money and giving them something useful that they already wanted. So I think it's brilliant. I think it's a fantastic product. It's super sleek, and just looking forward to see what else you guys build. I know the first iteration is very different than what comes in years and years later. So looking forward to seeing the next versions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Until next time.